Hey everybody! So I'm here with my buddy Jim, and what's it called? We may want to get this a little bit more
Yeah.
level.
I got you. Hold on. Go ahead and you want to pause it or
Can't really pause it.
I got you. Hold on.
Sorry for the technical difficulties, guys. Should have checked it. So the table's a little bit unlevel, so we're just trying to get something to make it a bit more level. Thank you, man. Perfect. Okay, cool. So I just want to introduce you all to my buddy Jim here. For some of you may be watching on replay, and we're just here in Nashville. And the reason I've brought Jim on today is actually Jim is a good friend of mine. We went to college together, and recently, I've moved back to the Nashville area. I've had a chance to catch up with Jim, and he's kind of explained to me that long term he's thinking about Portugal, and I thought, isn't that fascinating? I think that would be a really great topic to kind of discuss and to share with you guys, because up to this point I haven't had tons of guests. It's been we got our first. Oh, cool, Dr. B. Good to see you. Hey, how are you doing? This is my buddy Jim, and we're just talking about Portugal, and we're talking about kind of exploring expat plans. And I thought that, something that some people may think is that, it's kind of a niche thing, but I thought, it might be helpful for some of you all to meet my buddy here and to kind of discuss what we're trying to do here. Yeah, Dr. B
Nice
is
to meet
a follower, and really interesting. Okay, so the first thing I'll mention here is that Jim and I are not yet expats. Actually, we're both living here in Nashville and working, but this is kind of long-term thinking, long-term planning. And so Psycho Candy says, how do you all make money in it? Is there any way like we can ask her to stop whistling? She's sorry. How do you all make money in a USD salary long term? What happens when the money runs out? Do you want to?
Yeah. So I have been following a lot of the FI kind of movement for a long time, just from a philosophy standpoint. But this year was really the first year that I kind of took it seriously in processing, what that meant, what sort of goals are there, and kind of that vision for my life long term. So we basically that ultimately is the goal long term. It's to get eventually to a 5 point and go from there.
Can you talk a little bit about that, Jim, as far as like what kind of preempted you being interested in pursuing that and thinking about that?
Sure. So for me, I had experiences with my parents. My father was fired after 19 years working for a company. My stepfather was fired after 17 years working for a company. And so that kind of instilled in me long term that I need to be prepared for those sort of situations. The idea of working 20 years for a place and getting a pension and getting a gold watch is just not viable.
That must have been devastating to you to see these guys give up multiple decades of their lives, a large chunk of their working years, and sacrifice to these businesses, assuming that they'd be taken care of. If they took care of the company, if they operated in the best interest of the company, that there's kind of this obligation that the employer has to the person. It just kind of makes me think about the in the 80s we kind of swapped in the US from a tripartite model, a business model that takes the not just the shareholders into account, but also the employees and the customers into account. We've kind of shifted in America over to this model where we only keep the shareholders in mind. That's why customer service has really kind of been struggling over in recent years, and also why some of these corporations have really done people a disservice.
Those experiences were very transformative for me early on, and so my goal is to put myself in a position where if that happens to me, I'm not financially devastated. That I've got a backup, not a backup plan, but a plan for myself that kind of moves through jobs. And somebody, one of my mentors a long time ago told me that jobs are temporary, but work is permanent. And that mindset has really kind of laid the foundation for ultimately getting into FI and finding that movement.
Was there a certain influencer or kind of person that introduced you to FIRE?
I think Mr. Money Mustache is always the one.
Yeah, that's awesome. For those who don't know, Mr. Money Mustache is a FIRE blog, right? It's a gentleman who kind of got into real estate and living frugally below his means. And I think he just lives off his real estate income now, right?
Basically. And he does some sort of construction work as well. But it's pretty much just his investments. And he was kind of interesting to me because he lives in Longmont, Colorado, which is a town that's about 15 minutes outside of Fort Collins, which is a large college town. Colorado State University is there. That's a 25, 30,000 student university, major public institution in the state. This isn't, for me, as somebody who grew up in Colorado, it wasn't like it was somebody that was living in Costa Rica or Malaysia or Thailand or wherever.
He's somebody you could relate to.
Somebody I could relate to, and somebody who the numbers made sense to me because I saw, I've been there. I know what that town's like. And so it wasn't as foreign to me as some of the expat.
Some of these guys, you see them I've been living in Timbuktu for 35 years, and I moved here when I was 35, and it's well, that's pretty young to hit FIRE. I'm not gonna say some people won't through high salary, through diligent saving, but it's not really practical when somebody's been out of the country, in my mind, for decades and decades to try to retro engineer their plan. They likely benefited from getting real estate when it was really cheap. Maybe they got some inheritance when they were young that offset their moving us overseas. There's a lot of hidden things that people aren't going to necessarily disclose when they're in a setting where they're being recorded or having to kind of be accountable. And so it's incredible that you're able to find somebody that's based here in the US that kind of has that experience. That being said, let's tag on some of what Dr. B said. I'm trying to achieve financial independence here in the US. I have part-time hours to make $12.50 an hour. That's nothing. Can't even survive off that. Could you tag on that a bit, Jim? I'm just curious about that.
Absolutely. So wage depression has been a kind of a feature, not a bug of the system for the past 20 years. And
focused on shareholders, focused on
shareholders,
shareholder return as opposed to taking care of the working people.
The cost of real estate in our metro, the Nashville metro, has gone up significantly. I want to say more than
double. I mean, easily more than double in 10 years, especially on the more modest end. Maybe if you're your Dave Ramsey or your Kelly Clarkson looking at multi-million-dollar places, it doesn't matter. But for the average person who can't afford to live in, say, Franklin, Brentwood area, then it becomes really untenable to buy a home here if you didn't grow up here with a home,
or if you didn't get just if you weren't in the right place at the right time. And I don't feel like people here recognize how many of them were in the right place at the right time.
Yes.
And that sort of situation. Give me just a second.
Sure. Yeah, it's in the 1970s you could buy a house in this area for say around 30,000 US. Of course, the interest rates were quite high, but then now that same house that went for 30,000 US, depending on the neighborhood in Nashville, 50 years later could go anywhere from $500,000 to upwards of $1 million. If you're looking at the Green Hills neighborhood, for example, I knew a guy who bought a house in that neighborhood in I think 1971 for 30,000. That house recently sold for I think over $2 million. He did some updates to it, but it's the $30,000 house didn't really become 60 times better in the course of 50 years. It's just
right place, right time.
Yeah, right place, right time. And American corporations will exploit farm-wide. They don't care. Reagan administration tax laws and encouragement from Congress of that period contributed to that. Sadly, neoliberalism is international. Yeah, I would agree with that. I'd say that it's kind of a wrong policy to go into expat life or fire thinking, I'm just going to go get a job over there. Like that's, because a lot of people, they're used to doing that in America, or say if you're in Europe, I just go down the street, apply to the job, get the job. But a lot of these countries, the wage is really low, so if you're looking at what it costs to live there versus what you're going to get for your money, it's typically quite expensive for local people. So like you want to talk about a prime example that is the Philippines. A lot of expats really love how affordable the Philippines are, but if you're a Filipino person from the Philippines, it's actually pretty expensive. You're on an island chain. You've got limited infrastructure. It's not an easy place to live. Whereas I feel like, in America, you can, in the course of your career, you can out earn your monthly expenses. It takes a while. And I do want to acknowledge, Dr. B, that I understand you're 22 and it's really hard to be 22 in 2021. Yeah. I should say it's hard to be 22 in 2022. But it's a challenging time to be a young person. It feels like, the differentiator is like, do your folks own property or not? Are they going to help you out?
The same thing, we were talking about the Philippines in terms of kind of raising the cost of living for local people. Florida's in the same boat. So many people have moved from all over with a lot more money than what you could what you could
reasonably earn locally. What an average local Floridian could come up with working at a bar on the beach or perhaps doing equipment rentals. Mm-hmm. These industries that were common in Florida, because the other, you're basically working in hospitality. You're not. It's not fleshed out like certain other areas. Like if you're in Denver, you can work in oil and gas. You can work in technology. You can work in education. There's a variety there, and some of that's in Florida, but there's just some, it's people pay a lot to live in Florida because they want to live in Florida, not because they're usually driven there by a job. Very few people, I think, would be driven to move to Florida for work. I'm down in Florida, and people joke about Detroit, but it's a very good deal. Save on taxes, higher wages up north, older but established infrastructure. I actually thought about moving to Detroit at one time before I moved to Colorado, because I at the time I had some disposable income and I thought I could get into real estate, but it's just got a bad reputation and it's quite dangerous. Several of the people that I know from Detroit have warned me, like, yes, it is quite affordable, but it's, when I was in Medellin, one of the most striking conversations I had, it was the last day of my time in Medellin. And the owner of the hotel I'm staying in comes and gets me. He's like, "Hey, an American just showed up. Hey, he wants to meet you. I told him about your channel." I'm like, "Cool. I'd love to meet him. I'm always, open to meeting new people. At least at this point in my channel, may change one day." But he, said, "Oh, hey man, nice to meet you. Where are you from?" And I said, "Oh, I'm from Nashville." And he said, "Oh, I'm from Detroit." And I was like, "Oh, I love Detroit." Because honestly, I've had a good time when I went to Detroit. I went for the Gateway Conference in 2017 for Alibaba, and it was a wonderful time. And he explained to me some of the violence he encountered in his own family, some of the things that he struggled with. He lost his brother to a serious crime, and I won't say it by name to respect the algorithms, but it's not an easy place, even though it's affordable, even though it's appealing. There's a lot of risk. You're getting a good deal to take on the risk. Similar to Memphis, right,
Yes.
Jim?
Yes, absolutely.
Jim lived in Memphis for a while, I think. Yeah.
About 4 years. So I was born in Memphis. We moved when I was young. And then I went back there for school to get my master's degree, University of Memphis. And I lived there for about 4 years. So I moved back to the Nashville area recently. But yes, you are absolutely cheap is what you pay, value is what you get.
Price is what you pay, value is what you get. Yeah. So I think Jim can attest to that a lot. In Memphis, you can get a really good deal on an apartment, right? You could, in some cases, you'll pay half the price of Nashville. Would you say that's about? You can pay half the price, but you're risking serious crime. One of the first times I went to hang out with Jim in Memphis, I think it was about a year ago.
Yeah,
it was about a year ago, and when I showed up, his landlord had actually had his truck stolen from the parking lot. Minutes perhaps before I showed up, right? Oh, yeah. So within a half hour before, and this isn't something that Jim had any control over. He's not living in it. In my opinion, his area is one of the premier areas of Memphis.
Absolutely.
One of the most desirable places that everybody in Memphis that's our age that would want to live in Memphis, that's the neighborhood they would pick. They'd rather be there than anywhere else because you can walk to different places, restaurants. Incredible. But there's a reason it was more affordable. I thought about moving there as well. And Jim was kind of like, "Hey, I know that it seems like a good deal, but there are some real problems here that I wouldn't want you to overlook, just for the hope that you're going to."
And the spillover. So Memphis has had the highest increase in rent percentage-wise, or one of the top three highest percentage year-over-year rent increases from 2019 to 2020 in the country. It was, I want to say, number 3. And so the value proposition that it proposed 5, 7, 8 years ago is not there. In terms of just the rents themselves.
Used to be appealing to artists. If you were an artist and you wanted to work a part-time job and maybe focus on your art, you could get away with that in Memphis. You could find a house share for probably $100-$200 a month at one time in the last 10 years. Maybe you spend $300 if you want a little bit more space or whatever, but really cheap prices, something that you could work like on the weekends and focus on your stuff. But that's really shifted. But let's see. Tony says, Hey, Tony, good to see you. Yeah, I'm just chatting with my buddy Jim here. He's got Portugal on the mind, and we've just kind of been talking about with Dr. B or Psycho Candy as they go in the chat about the value proposition of living in some places. And it's not a total discouragement, right? So something I'd say that's kind of a counterpoint to Detroit is like, let's say that you went and got like a CCNA or a networking, some kind of like IT certification, not, go get a master's, but like something that's manageable within a couple of years that's budget friendly. You could absolutely go to a place like Detroit or Rochester and get a basic IT job and probably save up enough to buy a decent place because the economy in those areas is somewhat depressed, but the bones are still there, right? Mm-hmm. You still have General Motors in Detroit. You still have Ford with a presence in Detroit. You have Rocket Mortgages with a presence in Detroit. You have the Detroit Lions. You've got a number of big businesses that still exists in that kind of region that, you may not get something crazy fancy, but you can certainly get like a really nice house in Michigan and in many parts of Michigan for say $200,000, as opposed to here in Nashville, where if you want a nice house, you're going to spend $400,000.
Yeah, for sure. And people like to use this as just kind of a throwaway term, but brain drain is real. So if you have something, go learn a skill, whatever that is, whether it's IT, whether that's whatever.
Sales, it doesn't have to be, medicine or law. It really, neither of us are doctors or lawyers.
We don't play any on TV either.
We don't play any on TV. And it's, there's really two ways to kind of address wanting to live overseas. And I think Jim would agree with this as well, as you can, two ways that will kind of roll the ball toward it is you can lower your monthly expenses and you can raise how much money that you make. So those are the main two levers that an average individual has as far as getting things going in their favor, right? To spend less money, there's a lot that could go into that. You could cut out costs, you could cut out certain bills, you could find cheaper alternatives, etc. But the more challenging thing in my mind is the idea of making more money, right? Is raising your income, because most people feel like I'm making as much as I can. What more could I do? Because I'm limited to how much time I can sell. I can't manufacture more time to sell for more money. And so that's where you want to look at things that provide you leverage, right? You want to get leverage, and that's what can help you to make money and to get ahead. So having digital skills, maybe you're an artist, getting graphic design experience, these kinds of things can provide you leverage, because with certain skill sets, you can do them online. And as long as you have internet connection, you're able to complete the work. That's different than, say, and this isn't to crap on garbage men or women, but if you're working in sanitation services, it's unlikely that you're going to be able to do that job remotely. It's a job where you're probably going to have to go in and be there in person, where certain other skill sets, you absolutely can do them with the computer. Like what we're doing here, I can do this kind of thing anywhere in the world, and it's just so rewarding for me to be able to connect with people like this. Now, am I making a bunch of money from YouTube? Absolutely not. I'm definitely in the red, but my hope is that one day, if I continue to make good content and kind of share these perspectives with you all, that there will be some kind of reward. But that's Psycho Candy says, that's my problem with a lot of the older people, especially men. They crap on the younger men as if we don't want to work or lack a strong work ethic. The value of a dollar is worth less. Yeah, I think you're dealing somewhat with some delusional boomers. There are a number of people, not all. I definitely don't want to. I'm not an absolutist person. I don't believe in throwing individuals under the bus for the sake of a group discussion. I do believe in anecdotes, but I say that all that to say that I have some older viewers that I respect. They've been kind, insightful. They're self-aware. They're not. But there's a good chunk of boomers, and you're going to see this especially in conservative areas, much more so than liberal areas in my experience. Not always the case, but one of the differences is it tends to be such that in a liberal area, they don't hide poverty as well. In more conservative regions of the country, it seems like they do a better job in kind of. Would you kind of agree with that, Jim? Like squirreling it away, like it's
that, and also, there's a difference, in poverty. Poverty looks different in different places. If it's costing you every penny to maintain a appearance of survival and
having a car, having a house, eating
in an area, in a more conservative area that requires you to blend in a way. That's the whole, most Americans can't come up with $500 in an emergency. That says, that people are not that the lifestyle creep the other side of the wealth equation is not on their side either, even if it doesn't look like they are in poverty, and certainly, not in poverty in comparison to a global context, right? None of
That's fair. That's fair.
It's
important to contextualize when we talk about poverty in America. It's not the same as poverty in like Colombia or Indonesia.
But the problem is that people here don't understand necessarily that the middle price that they're paying, even though it doesn't look like they're in poverty, is
significant. Significant. Yeah, I would say that I definitely have the experience of asking people, why do you do things this way? And the response I get is, that's how it's always been done. And some ways that's good. For example, if you're somebody that you're diligent about showing up on time for work, keep showing up on time for work. Nothing wrong with following the tradition of meeting your responsibilities. But if you're somebody that, let's say, you smoke 2 packs a day, well, you need to quit. Just because your daddy smoked and his daddy smoked doesn't mean that you should keep doing this kind of self-destructive behavior pattern and analyzing, well, I'm not going to be in the paradigm of the old way is good and the new way is bad. I'm going to be in the paradigm of finding what works best for me. And so when we talk a little bit about, kind of touching on what you said about some of the older people, a long time ago, these people had really cheap asset prices. There was less competition. You had less competition for entry-level positions. Now entry-level positions are extremely competitive. I would say that's true for your industry and for my industry. Some people joke around about, pushing buttons on a computer is because that describes a lot of our jobs, regardless of the industry you work in. Most young people, if they're making a living wage, they're punching buttons on a computer, right? You'll see people who see that and they say, oh, that's so easy. And, oh, you're not really working. And, oh, you sit in a chair and blah, 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 blah. And they don't understand just because something is not physically demanding doesn't mean it's not a difficult job. An attorney, for example, just because an attorney doesn't lift weights, lift boulders over their head every day.
That's a very difficult job.
It's a very difficult job. You're talking about a job that very few people are actually suited to do. You've got to be extremely hardworking, high stress tolerance, not interested in having a personal life if you want to be a top performing lawyer. I mean, some lawyers will work 80 hours a week because there's different reasons for why they might do that. That's not my temperament. I don't feel like that's Jim's temperament either. It's not that we're too lazy to work 80 hours a week. It's that's not a life. You're not existing anymore at that point, especially if you think you're going to do that forever. So I would also say focus on good judgment more than hard work, because there's at $12.50 an hour, there's no amount of hard work that's going to build wealth at that wage. I mean, you could earn that for a long time and it's still not going to be able to overcome. So definitely get leverage in terms of skills. Learn about money. Attack your insecurities about money, because that's something I had to deal with. I think that Jim's also dealt with that. We've had a lot of conversations about our insecurities about money and making money and improving our status. And it's
So I'll answer
Tony
Pharaoh's question and then go back to Tony's.
Sure.
So I'm actually not in programming. I'm in a little bit different field. And for me, I bought into a lie, right? That said, I need a master's degree. My mother had a master's degree. So that's what I needed to define myself, and that was an absolute lie, right? Like,
your self-value was the same before your master's degree.
Exactly.
I had the same amount of respect for Jim as I did before he did the master's degree.
But if I had not, I always would have asked myself the question, what would have been had I not done it? So it was more of a personal issue for me personally. So for me, Portugal as opposed to Latin America or East Asia, for me, it's as somebody who's studied a lot of European culture.
You've been to Europe.
I've been to Europe.
Jim's been to Europe. I haven't yet. So.
Unfortunately, only once. For me, it feels like a more comfortable first step. I definitely want to spend time when I get to the point that I can exploring
Southeast Asia,
Latin America, Europe, and kind of trying everything to figure out what really fits me at that time. But from an on-paper standpoint, the idea of getting EU citizenship in a fairly quick rate is appealing. The incentives for crypto investment are appealing in a way as well. And then
Metal Gear, one of my subscribers, I think he's probably busy today, but he chimed in about that. He was telling me also that Portugal is quite friendly to people who are into the crypto space.
Mm-hmm.
I think that it's really interesting and awesome that they're willing to adopt to kind of a faster pace to adopting this new technology or this new paradigm that we find ourselves in. Now, I want to tag on their questions and then give Jem a chance to chime in as well. Is there a reason you chose to take a more costly university computer programming course rather than a lower cost, high quality coding courses online? Yes. So I'm going to try to be efficient in answering this because this is one I could go on for hours and hours about Pharaoh Phoenix. But in this case, the first thing is that a number of these internships, right? I'm looking at these internships, paid internships at major technology companies. They universally require you to be in a university program. So they will not accept anybody as an intern unless they are a bachelor's or master's or PhD level student. So let's say I wasn't in university, I could apply to them all day long, but they're just not going to take me. And some people might say, oh, well, what's the pay rate? Well, some of these internships pay a lot of money. Amazon, for example, they pay their software interns $7,000 a month and then $2,000 a month toward housing. So even though the courses are expensive, I believe that they'll pay for themselves over the course of my lifetime, many, many times over. Another aspect is that it's official, right? So what you have in the universities and colleges is you have regional accreditation. And what regional accreditation means is that it hits certain standards that national, basically big corporations and government entities recognize. It's a standard that they've been exposed to. They know that if somebody graduates from this university, they're going to know at least this stuff. They may not know everything. They may not know a bunch of niche kind of random stuff, but they're going to have the fundamentals down. The challenge that I have too is accountability. For me, these online courses, if I just say fuck it and just don't do it, I should have. Well, this is going to be 18 and up now. But say whatever, I'm not gonna, I'm not gonna do it. Then there's no accountability. I'll just drop the course. It'll disappear. Maybe I paid $10. Who cares about $10? But when I'm paying, say $2,000 a course, I better get that right. I better not mess up too many times, because every time I mess up a course, there's another $2K that goes out the window. And so I do feel that pressure to perform, to go all out, to put in crazy hours trying to master the material. Because if you get into computer science and programming, it can be extremely unforgiving. It can be extremely frustrating, extremely discouraging. It is the highest, most dropped out major. So that's part of it. I wanted to prove to myself that I could go into the most difficult major there is and get through it. At a lot of universities, it's like a 90% dropout rate for computer science. When I took computer science 2, we started the year with, I think, 40 students, and we finished the semester with 5 or 6. And I've seen that at different universities, and I've seen that at different computer programming classes. So for me, it's trying to figure out not am I good within my own opinion, but am I good enough for the people who could pay the big bucks? Because those are the people that I want to impress. I'm happy with myself. I'd be happy if things didn't pan out, but I'd be a lot happier if I rose to the occasion, mastered these extremely difficult concepts, and made it through. But yeah, I hope that answers the question, Farrah Phoenix. I'm going to try to hit the next couple comments. Tony says, Alex, you have a good mind about how to be successful work in finances. Thank you so much, Tony. I really appreciate that. And great. He says, great answer, Jim. I only asked as most apt, I'd seem to pick Southeast Asia or Latin America. Yeah, I think that's what's so fascinating about what Jim has kind of like brought to my attention is Jim is actually one of the main people that got me to take Portugal seriously. Not that I didn't before, but you read about all kinds of places online. There's no end to the amount of places that are the perfect digital nomad hotspot. But Jim is somebody that I've known well before I got into traveling abroad. I've known Jim now for almost 10 years. And so he's somebody that like I can go to and have a reasonable expectation that the insight that he shares with me is he's put a lot of thought into it. He's thought about things from different angles. He's it's not just an overnight impulse. Like it probably took some time for you to come to think about Portugal.
Yeah, and in terms of, I guess for me the big thing is Portugal. It's just kind of a fascinating place. Europe in general is fascinating to me,
is it the history? It's
the history. It's the culture. The sport. Football. Which I love. I love soccer. I love football. But also, I think I don't want to be in a position, and I feel like there's some digital nomads that are kind of in this place where they move to a Latin America, they move to Southeast Asia, and then they find the door shut behind them in terms of getting back. And
that's brilliant insight. One of the things I want to accomplish with my channel is being realistic and accurate and not selling a pipe dream. And Jim has hit on an incredible point there that some people think that, once I get off the plane in Thailand, I'm set for the rest of my life. I'm done. It's over. I won. And they don't understand long-term budgeting. They don't understand. In Thailand, you can have a 10% inflation rate. So in a few years, your cheap place is now perhaps out of budget if you haven't increased your income. And so do you feel like a place like Portugal is going to have more opportunities for you to be an entrepreneur or to kind of come up with different ways of making money?
Well, I think that's part of the story. But for me, kind of the EU citizenship is the biggest selling point.
You want to know that you have political rights, basically.
And protection
more importantly.
Because
not the freedom to, the freedom from in this.
Yeah, and it's. I feel like we're entering a very. This is a very turbulent time, that we're not seeing the true effects of the inflation. We have so much pent up.
Money printer go burr.
There's so much pent up demand. There's pent up frustration. You see,
people want to spend money and they can't spend money in some cases,
and they can't spend money because they're not making enough at their jobs. For them to step out and say, okay, I have confidence in my situation enough to go take a car loan, to go take a house loan, right? I don't have confidence
to celebrate the holiday at the bar as opposed to at home. That's been a common thing I've noticed is more people, instead of opting to go to the bar with their friends, they'd rather get the drinks and have them at home, which on surface seems, oh, great, they're being cheap. But, the bar industry does employ people. So there is a bartender out there that's not going to get the same tips.
Well, it's that, but it's also, when I'm at home, and I love house parties. I love hanging out with people in their houses for sure. Like that's something I've always enjoyed. But if I'm hanging out with 3 people at their house, there's not going to be some random person who will be an unexpected connection, you know, in the sort of unexpected idea generators. The spontaneity of being in a space with other people. And there's value to that as well, that it's hard to explain monetarily.
Yeah. It's hard to put a price tag on innovation, on collaboration, on dynamism.
It's one of the reasons why San Francisco and New York are the way they are, is because of people that have been able to put themselves in rooms with other people, and for those rooms to create connections and to really push innovation. And, you know, can you do that online? Absolutely. Can you do that through YouTube and through any other
medium?
Absolutely. But it's a different sense, as, you know, to have 8, 10, 12 million people in a city, and to have all of
80% of which have advanced degree or have college degrees, and 80% of which are, or maybe I'd say at least 50% are working in your industry, or I shouldn't say percentages, more so there's a critical mass of people that, even if there's only 100,000 people, if you working in biotech with you, that's more than anywhere else in America. You're not going to go to many places in America where you have probably 10% of the city population is a programmer or some variation of a programmer. And so for people who are looking for that collaboration, it shifts. I feel like it shifts over time, because at times places like Nashville and Austin become really popular for that. But now the inflation has gotten so high, and those places have become so much more expensive than and SF and New York have come down in price, because a lot of people are fleeing the high taxes, fleeing the regulations. There is that kind of gray area to consider, is like, it's not just the cost that I think of. It's the whole picture. Ed says, my friend did not graduate uni. He went to community college, found a path acquiring Cisco certs. Then he got security clearances. He's always been able to get IT jobs for U.S. contractors. Good salary, daily expenses, free apartment. He keeps up with the certs and is willing to work anywhere like Kuwait or Saudi Arabia. Yeah, I mean, part of that is, and I'd like for Jim to touch on this as well, is part of that is being willing to move. I mean, I think at one point you moved to Memphis for work and for uni, but then later I think you were offered an opportunity up here, and that was perfect for you. Yeah.
And you know, in my field, it's kind of a weird field in that every town, every place needs one. Very few towns need 2. And so for us, you know, doors aren't open if you don't move. It is very, very hard to climb in places if you're not willing to take that risk. And so, not to say that it's not possible, because it is, but
you're gonna be waiting a long time.
You'll be waiting a very long time usually, and even at that point, there's no promise that you'll move up the ladder there. And so, one of my coworkers, she just moved down from Chicago because there were no entry-level jobs in her field. Chicago is one of the star fields, or one of the star cities in my field. And so it's a very, very competitive place. It's very, very hard to get in the door.
If you're anything less than like a top 10 school grad or whatever.
Or even if you don't have 7 years of experience, 10 years. Like, if you don't have the experience, it's very, very hard to get in the door. And so her calculation was that, you know, it's better for me to get in the door somewhere else,
come back,
than it would be to
That's where I'm at as well. I'm so glad that you shared that too, Jim, because that's kind of where I'm at with technology. It's hard to get your foot in the door here in Nashville, in my opinion and in my experience, versus bigger cities where there's just a higher volume of opportunities. Some people would, say, "Oh, isn't it competitive?" And it's like, yeah, it's competitive, but you just have to get one job. You're not trying to get every job in a given city. You just want one at a time, and so maybe some will have two, but most people just need one.
And the flip side of that in Nashville is the songwriters, right? I mean, it's a very, very competitive market for songwriters, but you don't need the Beatles or the Rolling Stones level of success. You need one hit song to get in the door.
Yeah,
right.
They kind of paves the way, and that's somewhat in my industry is the case where like you don't need to work at every awesome company. If you work at just one awesome company, it kind of shows that you're this caliber where it builds an established trust. And so I think it's definitely at the point that Ed made about being willing to work anywhere. If you're kind of a young guy and you're wanting to live overseas at some point, you want that experience. Consider doing it the career route. I mean, I know at my employer now, some people have managed to work their way up and get transferred overseas. So that's something that can, flexibility tends to come with seniority. And so if you see, a certain field leading you in the direction that you want, then start down that path and don't put it off forever, because at some point, you're going to be 30, you're going to be 40. And if you start, when you're in your 20s, then those years can be better than if you started later.
And then going back to, being 22, and not making that much. I mean, whatever you can afford to stock away, historically in the U.S. over the past 100 years plus ish, the market has
gone up. It's gone up about like, I don't know, something like 10% a year since 1964. The only caveat is, I think if you invested in like 66 or 60, from like 69 to I think 81 or 82, you had like poor inflation adjusted returns because you had high inflation in the 70s.
But even then,
you still did good. And you still did good.
And you're looking at doubling rates anywhere from 6 to 8 years for your money. So for us that are closer to 30, and you being 22, you have another cycle of doubling. That you can get started. Time is your friend. Time is on your side. Despite what anybody tells you, time is on your side.
Yeah, just and keep in mind too, like, value your time. That's something that can help with trying to find leverage. Is that leverage will help your time become more valuable and more in demand, and more people will want to hire you, and you'll be able to negotiate offers more effectively. You do want to be investing, but at $12.50 an hour, something that I would try to go for if you can is go for something that pays $15 an hour. Even if it kind of sucks, even if it's not exactly what you want to be doing, that difference will matter. And then, maybe you do the 15 an hour thing for a year and you try to go for something making 20 an hour, but consistently, like, try to put extra away and also try to increase, what you're bringing in, because
absolutely
you can make $1 million a year, but if you spend $1.2 million a year, you're still going to be in debt.
And the Choose at 5 people, who I listen to a lot, I listen to their podcasts often. They're big in the Salesforce game.
Yeah.
Which
they do sales work, or
but it seems like it can be a promising route too, if that's something that you're into. And they have a whole thing about it.
Sales work can definitely provide leverage if you're somebody that you have experience in customer service. If you're interested in sales is a field where the outputs are not tied to the inputs, right? So a really good salesperson can sell tons and tons of cars, whereas a really bad salesperson will sell very few. It's in the same amount of time, So it's more about skill set, and it's more about value and what you bring to the table than how many hours you can put in, because
And going back to Ed's point, I mean, there's 1,000 roads. Like, none of us have to have the same path to, a career. There's so many options.
It's a blue ocean as far as opportunity for young people, and
for sure.
But well, I think we're gonna start wrapping this up in the next 10 minutes or so. I just really glad to join Jim here. I apologize for yesterday's stream being kind of sideways, but so I guess kind of coming back to Portugal for a bit, I just wanted to touch on that a bit more, because Jim's got a lot of insight about it. What are some of the factors that you feel like will help you have a decent standard of living, but perhaps lower your monthly expenses? For example, do you plan to have a car in Portugal?
No. So that's, for the most part, many places, and one of the big factors in America in terms of our cost of living being as high as it is cost of transportation. The average American household spends $9,000 to $10,000 a year on automotive related expenses.
That's a lot of money, $9,000 to $10,000 a year,
especially when your average or your median income's in $50,000 to $60,000 range.
Yeah.
I mean, you're talking about 20% that you're spending. You don't
have a choice. If you're commuting to work, you don't have a choice when it comes to buying a car.
Mm-hmm. And that's the public transit side is a big deal for me. Wherever I end up, if I can retire early and that works out, that's a big part of what I'm looking for is a situation where I'm not car dependent.
Because if a car, I feel like you've probably been in this situation. If your car breaks down, like that could affect your job. If you can't get to work, that could affect your ability to pull in money. Where if you are living in a place where you're not car dependent, then you can you put that money towards something else. You don't have to deal with that risk. You don't have to worry about car insurance. You don't have to worry about licensure. You don't have to worry about parking. You don't have to worry about oil changes, about tire rotations, and all these things that a car owner has to be cognizant of.
And in the U.S.,
it's not optional.
It's the most dangerous thing that we do, by far.
Extremely high risk to drive.
And
the infrastructure, it's also important to note, the infrastructure in the U.S. is not built for the amount of people that use it.
No, absolutely not. And the infrastructure models that we use are built to create new things, not to maintain existing things. And so when you get in state of repair situations like in Memphis, if anybody's heard of the bridge crack that shut down the I-40 bridge over the summer, it shut down Mississippi River traffic, the barges.
Really significant economic impact.
Very much so. And, it's because we don't have the funding mechanisms and really the mentality to properly maintain our existing infrastructure. I know that's not necessarily the subject of this, but it's something I could talk about for.
It's definitely it's worth discussing, like infrastructure as far as like day-to-day lifestyle, because
absolutely.
That's something that's drawing me back to Northern California is the public transit. For me, I can't afford to replace my car at the snap of my fingers. I don't want to be in that position, and so even though I might pay a bit for public transit, the lowered risk really has improved my life a lot. The lowering of the risk of getting in a wreck or of having my tire wear out or whatever it is goes out the window. And so for me, like when I go to work, that's one less thing I have to worry about when it comes to getting to my place of employment and getting my job done, doing things in a satisfactory manner and getting everything done that I need to get done. But kind of wrapping up, are there any things that maybe unique differences that you think that people should be aware of when it comes to, say, life in the U.S. versus life in Portugal? And of course, I know this could be a bit broad because there is no one place in the U.S. There's a lot of places that are very different from each other in the U.S. But is there anything that, aside from the car situation, that, yeah?
I think for there's so much in American life that we kind of take for granted. We take car accidents, for example, for granted. We take violence in a way for granted. That that this is the price that we pay to live in a free society, and the reality of the situation is that so many other places have the same or higher qualities of life while reducing risk factors for
the average person.
For the average person. And I think, when we talk about the U.S. and the value that this country provides to people, I think that is something that goes, I guess, underappreciated in a way. If I have health insurance, but I have not so good health insurance, and not being able to go see a doctor for a time period, but ultimately having to have a more costly procedure done because I wasn't able to do the preventative maintenance on my body that I needed to originally, that's a cost of life. That's a quality of life factor too. And there's so many things in the U.S., little things that we just kind of take, that these things have to be this way. And
it is what it is. You just got to deal with it. I've heard that constantly, and it's like, no, we live in the freest country in the world. We don't have to just accept. If we
wanted to do something different, we could. But it would require a lot of
collective action, which in an individualist society is fleeting, just to be honest. And also, so I think that is something that would appeal to people that are looking for collective kind of community feelings, is that in the U.S., because there is that opportunity to be an individual, it can cause people to lose sight of relationships, valuing relationships, valuing interpersonal connection. I've been very surprised coming back to Nashville. Not everybody is this way. In fact, it's a minority of people this way, but some people are very, very confrontational and aggressive. And it threw me off because a lot of the places that I've been, I feel like I used to play into that paradigm more when I was younger, but it threw me off because where I spent the first half of the year in South America was really calm and like almost milquetoast at times. In comparison, people were telling me, oh, it's so dangerous and crazy. It's like, no, like I come back here and I feel like I've come back to the developing country, compared to some of the places that I've been in, like Colombia and Peru and in Thailand. It's like, you don't have the tribalism to the same extent. You don't have the us versus them paradigm mentality to the same extent in some of these other countries, because people have a variety of things that fulfill them outside of work and making money. There's people who's like, the thing that they're proud of in some of these other places is that they're proud that they're a good Christian, or they're proud that they take their job seriously. They serve people really healthy, high quality food. Here, I think because we're more status oriented, that restaurant employees don't get respect that they deserve. In many cases, people who are, say, sanitation workers don't always get the respect they deserve. And so, if you want to shift that, it's over. Yeah. Hey, we're just wrapping up here. We got about 30 more seconds here, but thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate all you guys watching today. I just wanted to tie that point up, in that if you don't like the paradigm, there are ways that you can kind of adjust your trajectory and shift things. For me, I felt like I could finally see when I went to some of these other countries where people don't seem as much at each other's throats and engaged in a interpersonal conflict, and don't also brush it off so easily. In my mind, some of these things that you encounter or you see in Nashville, you see people in the middle of a mental health crisis, and it seems like in some places that you and I have spent time, that would be addressed in a healthy way. There would be deep concern, but here
we take it for granted.
They're choosing to do that. They want to be that way. They are who they are, and I'm different. I'm not that person. Where we sometimes, I think in the States, with the amount of wealth that we have here, we lose sight of the humanity in other people.
Absolutely.
But I don't think it's universal. I think there's still a lot of great people in America. I think that it's still got a lot of opportunity and ways to move up and to make yourself into something better, but also that it's important to be cognizant of some of the drawbacks and the weaknesses, some of the flaws, so that you're not just totally delusional about reality. But anyway, thanks so much for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed our guest today, Jim. Can't think of enough. He's been really insightful. He's well-read and knows a lot about this stuff and has a different perspective than me, but also some of the same interests. So it's just really cool to be able to share this with you guys. But yeah, we'll talk to you soon. Take care.
There you go.